Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really specific moment of tension, maybe conflict is the better word, in Los Angeles.
Right.
All captured over what? Just a single weekend back in June 2025.
Yeah, that's the focus. And the source material we've got here is a report from CBS News. Seems pretty detailed.
Right, detailing the events kicked off by Immigration Enforcement Operations, ICE.
Exactly. So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to pull out the key details from this specific report.
Follow the sequence, understand the different viewpoints presented in the report, give you a clear picture without, all the extra noise.
Yeah, just stick to what the source tells us.
So just looking at that setup, what kind of situation does this report suggest we're stepping into?
Well, it immediately signals something pretty dynamic, layered. It starts with these federal actions, ICE operations. Then you get immediate public reactions, protests, then a local government, state government responses. And it even brings in military personnel by the end. So definitely not a simple single thread, more like a chain reaction.
A chain reaction. That's a good way to put it. And the report seems to lay it out blow by blow.
It does.
Okay, so let's follow that timeline presented in the report. Friday evening, what does the source say was the initial trigger?
So Friday evening, according to the report, you had these large-scale ICE operations. Key areas of L.A. are mentioned: Westlake District, downtown South L.A.
And the report emphasizes these weren't just like random sweeps.
No. It mentions specifically serving 4 federal search warrants at 3 different locations. So targeted actions.
Okay, and the immediate result. The report mentions a big one at a job site.
Yeah, 44 unauthorized immigrants arrested right there.
Oh. Okay.
And the source adds, beyond just that one site, another 77 people were arrested in the sort of greater LA area around the same time.
So, quick math, that's over 120 arrests reported just from Friday's activity alone.
Pretty significant numbers right off the bat. And the report does note that as of Sunday afternoon, the exact charges weren't actually clear yet.
Right. So that's the trigger, these operations and arrests. What does the source say happened next as this news started getting out?
Well, predictably, as the report details, protests started pretty quickly.
Where did they first pop up?
The most prominent one initially Friday night was outside the federal building downtown. Apparently, the report says demonstrators had heard detainees were possibly being held inside.
Okay, makes sense. And did it say peaceful there?
No. The report notes tensions definitely went up. Some protesters apparently started throwing objects towards law enforcement.
Which led to?
Which led to the LAPD eventually declaring an unlawful assembly, and then they issued a dispersal order.
Okay, and here's where we get that first little snag, right?
Yeah.
The differing accounts that the source itself points out.
Exactly. The LAPD response time. When ICE asked for help...
Yeah, the report includes this note. A federal law enforcement official told CBS News it took LAPD over 2 hours.
But then a senior city official said, nope, it was 55 minutes.
Which is, quite a difference.
It really is. And it's interesting how quickly you see these different narratives forming, right?
Yeah.
About how agencies are coordinating, or maybe not coordinating. Depends who you ask, according to this source.
And the report also confirms federal officers were injured Friday.
Yes, it does mention injuries to federal law enforcement during those confrontations.
Okay, so that's Friday. Moving into Saturday, did the protests just stay downtown?
Not at all. The source says they continued, but they also spread. The focus shifted towards the city of Paramount.
Why Paramount?
Because ICE and other federal law enforcement officers were spotted there. But interestingly, the report includes a clarification.
Oh.
Yeah, a DHS spokesperson told CBS News that agents were just staging at an office there. They were quite clear. It was not a raid in Paramount.
Okay. So official line is staging, but the presence itself sparked protests.
Seems that way.
Yep.
And the report says the protest that started in Paramount then spilled over into Compton.
And Compton, that's where things really seem to escalate, based on the report.
Dramatically, yeah. Hundreds of demonstrators gathered, and the report details a car actually being set on fire.
Where?
Right in the middle of an intersection, Alondra Boulevard and Atlantic Avenue.
Wow. And law enforcement's response?
The report says they deployed what looked like tear gas and also used non-lethal munitions on some protesters. And again, federal officers were injured on Saturday, too.
And arrests. Did the report mention Saturday numbers?
It did. It includes an update from LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell. He reported 29 arrests on Saturday.
So, day 2. Protests spread, more intense confrontations, property damage, a clear escalation according to this source.
Absolutely. And it's really, at this point, late Saturday night that the federal response goes, right to the top. The report details that next.
Right. President Trump gets involved,
Yeah.
announces on Truth Social he's deploying the National Guard.
Yeah, he called it 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest.
And he didn't stop there, did he? The report mentions another post on Sunday.
No, he followed up Sunday, specifically calling out Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass, criticizing their handling of it.
And the language got stronger.
Much stronger. The source says he referred to it as the ongoing LA riots and stated, these are not protesters, they are troublemakers and insurrectionists. And then he added that line, remember, no masks.
Quite the statement. The source also confirms the practical side of the presidential memoranda.
Yes, issued Saturday, it authorized at least 2,000 National Guard troops, mostly California National Guard specified.
And by Sunday, how many were actually on the ground in L.A., according to the report?
The report says U.S. Northern Command confirmed 300 Guard troops were physically in the area, deployed to Paramount, Compton, and downtown L.A.
And there was backup potentially available, too.
Yeah, the report adds this detail. 500 active-duty U.S. Marines, based out at 29 Palms, were put in prepared to deploy status, so ready to go if called upon.
Which really underscores the level of force being marshaled, even if not fully deployed yet. So Sunday. The troops start arriving downtown. What does the report describe seeing?
Well, CBS News Los Angeles captured images, according to the report, showing Guard members near the Metropolitan Detention Center. And they appeared to be using tear gas and also firing non-lethal rounds towards some groups of demonstrators there.
Okay, so direct engagement. And this immediately sparked reactions from California officials, right? The report details those.
Oh, absolutely. Very vocal reactions. Governor Newsom, the report says, went on X, formerly Twitter, calling the deployment purposefully inflammatory and escalating.
You didn't think they were needed?
No, he said Mr. Trump was deploying soldiers, not because there's a shortage of law enforcement, but because they want a spectacle. That's a direct quote cited in the report.
And he followed up formally.
Yes, sent a letter to Mr. Trump asking him to rescind the deployment. The source says Newsom argued there was no need, that state and local authorities could handle it, and warned the federal deployment actually risked escalating things further.
The report also mentions he met with local law enforcement chiefs.
Yeah, LAPD Chief McDonnell and LA County Sheriff Robert Luna. Newsom stated, again quoted in the report, they were here to keep the peace, not play into Trump's political games.
And Mayor Bass, what was her take, according to the source?
She called it a chaotic escalation. The report highlights her mentioning the fear people were feeling in the city, while also urging protesters to stay peaceful.
Any other political voices mentioned?
Yes. The report quotes former Vice President Kamala Harris calling it a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. And Representative Maxine Waters referred to it as a disruption, urging people to stand up for what is right.
So strong condemnation from state and local Democrats, basically.
Very strong. But amidst all that, the source makes sure to include ICE's perspective, too.
Right. How do they frame things?
Well, an ICE spokesperson offered a different angle. They stated their initial operations led to arresting, quote, a domestic abuser and a child rapist. So framing it around targeting specific dangerous individuals.
And they push back on the criticism.
They did. The source notes they criticized what they called irresponsible politicians for pushing dangerous and misleading rhetoric. They argued this rhetoric put communities and law enforcement at risk.
Did they single anyone out?
They specifically referenced the LAPD, according to the source, for reportedly calling violent riots peaceful protests. The spokesperson said Americans could see they were dangerous, not peaceful.
So that's really interesting. The source shows this fundamental clash in how the events themselves were even being described by different official bodies.
Absolutely. It wasn't just about the Guard deployment. It was about what actually happened on the streets and what you call it. A core disagreement highlighted right there in the report.
Okay, let's track Sunday's events on the ground, as detailed in the source. Protests continued downtown for day 3.
Yes. Started calmly, the report says, but then around 3 p.m., a large group marched from City Hall towards the federal building.
And that led to clashes again.
It did. Clashes with federal agents and some of the National Guard members stationed outside that building. The report says police reported people throwing projectiles, even concrete.
And the LAPD response?
They issued a citywide tactical alert, also an unlawful assembly declaration, and a dispersal order for that specific area downtown. The report notes arrests were being made.
The source mentions an incident with motorcyclists, too.
Yeah, 2 officers injured when 2 motorcyclists apparently tried to breach an LAPD line right in front of the detention center. Both riders were detained, according to the report.
Okay, while that was happening near the federal building, the source describes something else going on a few blocks away with Waymo cars.
Right, the driverless vehicles, a separate, smaller crowd apparently targeted them. The report says CBS reporters saw people spray painting them, throwing things at them, jumping on the windshields. About 6 vehicles involved. And then, a short time later, the report says all 6 of those Waymos were set on fire. There was helicopter footage mentioned showing smoke plumes, even small explosions, as a larger crowd watched.
That seems specific, and maybe highlights that it wasn't just one big group doing everything.
Exactly. The source paints a picture of multiple things happening at once. You had the marching and confrontation at the federal building, and then this targeted vandalism and arson elsewhere. The report also mentions people using chairs, bins, street signs to block Temple and Main Street.
And a bus got caught up in it.
Yeah, a Metro bus was stopped, spray-painted with anti-ICE messages, according to the report.
Okay, so things are pretty chaotic downtown by late afternoon Sunday. Where did the crowd move next?
Later, the report says, the crowd moved into the Civic Center area. Some people were setting off fireworks there. LAPD officers on horseback tried to push them back.
Did LAPD expand the dispersal order?
They did. A little before 9 p.m., the report states LAPD's Central Division declared the entire downtown area an unlawful assembly, ordering everyone to disperse.
But did that work?
Not entirely. The source describes the crowd then moving into the LA Live area around 9:30 p.m., blocking traffic there.
And still confrontations.
Yeah. Report says they kept lighting fireworks, throwing projectiles at police vehicles. Several fires were set dumpsters, trash bins, and at least one store had its windows smashed by people described as alleged looters.
And lots of property damage mentioned, too.
Dozens of buildings tagged with graffiti, according to the report, including LAPD headquarters itself, windows shattered there. Also the U.S. courthouse, the old LA Times building.
Okay, so widespread damage.
Yeah.
Now, Chief McDonnell held a news conference Sunday evening. What updates did he give, according to the source?
He reported 10 arrests for Sunday, bringing the weekend total Saturday and Sunday to 39 arrests.
Did he address the criticism about LAPD's response time again, that issue from Friday?
He did, and this is where he specifically brought up the California Values Act, SB 54.
Ah, the sanctuary state law component.
Exactly. He explained, according to the source, that LAPD has to comply with SB 54, which prohibits them from assisting federal immigration enforcement.
So that complicates things when ICE calls for backup.
Immensely, it seems. And what's really revealing is a quote the report includes from him. He said federal partners have been reticent to provide information to us before something happens because of that reason.
Wow. So the state law is actually creating an information barrier between federal and local law enforcement, according to the chief.
That's what the source indicates he's suggesting. A major operational challenge right there.
That detail about the information flow,
Yeah.
that feels really key from this source. Okay, another huge event Sunday afternoon, detailed in the report, the freeway blockage.
Yes, just before 4 p.m., demonstrators moved on to the 101 freeway.
Nearabouts.
Near the Aliso Street off-ramp downtown. Blocked several lanes, and the report says hundreds of people were watching from the Main Street overpass above.
So CHP, California Highway Patrol, had to respond.
Right. They closed that whole stretch of the freeway. CHP officers went onto the freeway itself, pushed the protesters back, deployed smoke-filled canisters. The report says some people tried to kick the canisters back at them.
Were arrests made there?
The report notes several people were taken into custody based on an aerial view.
Okay, so they cleared the freeway itself by about 5 p.m.
Yes, the report says the road itself was cleared. But then the problem shifted to the overpass.
What happened there?
People on the Main Street overpass started throwing objects down onto the freeway below, damaging cars that were presumably stopped or maybe trying to get through eventually.
What kind of objects? The report lists them.
It does. Street signs, fireworks, e-scooters, even pieces of concrete.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
Extremely. CHP deployed more smoke canisters towards the overpass, but the report says the crowd came back and kept throwing things.
And this is where a CHP vehicle caught fire.
Yes. The source says one of the thrown items reportedly set a CHP vehicle ablaze, and it describes officers trying to get into their vehicles while people were throwing cement towards them. Just a really intense, dangerous scene described there.
And the freeway stayed closed.
Southbound 101 was expected to remain closed until further notice, according to an LAPD statement cited in the report, because of all the debris and damage.
So massive disruption. The report mentions coordination between LAPD and the Sheriff's Department.
Yes. LASD, Sheriff Luna stated over 100 deputies were deployed around 6 p.m. Sunday to help LAPD and CHP, and they requested mutual aid from the State Office of Emergency Services.
So multiple agencies working together by Sunday evening. Did the CBS report mention anything happening outside LA?
Briefly, yes. It noted San Francisco police reported 60 arrests Sunday night related to activities that escalated into assault, vandalism, 2 officers injured there, property damage, including a police cruiser.
So related tensions, maybe?
Yeah.
Or just simultaneous events?
The report doesn't explicitly link them, just notes it happened the same night. It also mentions Pasadena.
What happened there?
A small gathering Sunday afternoon after federal officers were seen at a hotel. But the mayor urged calm, and the report says no actual enforcement activity was confirmed there. It just shows the anxiety, perhaps.
Yeah, that federal presence, even potential presence, was causing ripples. Okay, looking forward, the report includes a quote about future operations.
It does. From U.S. Representative Nanette Barragan. She stated, according to the source, that ICE enforcement and removal operations were expected daily for the next 30 days in L.A. County.
So this weekend wasn't necessarily the end of it.
Apparently not, based on her statement. And one final detail on coordination.
Yeah.
A federal law enforcement official told CBS News that sheriff's deputies, LASD, were assisting ICE with perimeter protection.
Ah, so some cooperation.
Yes, but, and this is key, reinforcing Chief McDonald's point, the official explicitly said LASD would not be assisting with the actual immigration enforcement efforts, likely because of SB 54.
Got a perimeter, yes. Enforcement, no. That distinction seems critical.
Okay, so stepping back, this deep dive just into this one CBS News report, it really shows how complex things got and how fast. You have the initial federal action, the ICE operations.
Right, the trigger.
Which then sparks this cascade. Protests, immediate pushback. Then you see local government responding, state government reacting, federal government weighing in at the highest level.
Multiple law enforcement agencies involved, federal, state, local, even the military eventually.
And the public reaction itself wasn't uniform, right? The report describes peaceful protesters, but also clearly details significant violence, vandalism, arson.
And we saw, even within the source material itself, conflicting accounts, like the LAPD response time.
Exactly, and completely different ways of characterizing the events. Was it protests? Was it riots? Depends who you ask, according to this report. ICE framing it one way, the governor another, the president yet another.
Connecting this to the bigger picture for you, the listener, looking this closely at how this specific report lays everything out, it really shows how policy, like SB 54, operations like the ICE warrants, and reactions all just collide on the ground.
And how quickly it escalates and splinters. You've got freeway shutdowns, burning cars, political arguments, interagency friction, all stemming from that initial trigger, as reported here.
Does seeing all these layers, these contradictions even, detailed in just one news source, change how you might think about reading or hearing about complex events like this?
For me, it really underscores needing to look past the headline. You have to dig into the specifics the report provides. Who did what? What were their stated reasons? Like ICE mentioning specific arrests or Chief McDonald citing the state law.
Right, and what were the tangible consequences described? The freeway closure, the Waymo fires, the arrests, the injuries, the graffiti. Those concrete details matter.
It forces you to see the nuances, the different threads, the different perspectives that even a single comprehensive report tries to capture.
It's definitely not simple.
Not at all. It's in those details, the reported facts and the reported disagreements, that you start to get a real sense of the situation's complexity.
So wrapping up, what does this all mean? We've traced the timeline from those initial ICE operations through a weekend of protests, clashes, property destruction, the National Guard deployment, and all the official and political reactions based only on what this CBS News report presented.
And it's clear this wasn't one single thing. It was this dynamic, messy interplay of actions and reactions, federal, state, local, public, all bouncing off each other, with conflicting information reported almost immediately.
Yeah. Which leads to maybe a final thought. The report ends by mentioning Representative Barragan's statement, the expectation of continued ICE operations daily for 30 days.
Right.
So given that context, and considering everything else this report detailed, the protests, the escalation, the violence, the very different political reactions, the apparent friction between law enforcement agencies, What do you think is the single most critical piece of information from this specific source to keep in mind when thinking about what might happen next in Los Angeles?